I'm going to take a few minutes before we close up to pull some of the thoughts that I've had over a long period of time together. Some of us here are older, some of us are younger, some of us are married, some of us are not married, some of us are men, some of us are women, some of us are interested in the military, some of us are interested in women's rights. Iran is so complicated that there isn't an issue in the world that doesn't emanate out of what's going on in Iran. So I'm just going to read you my thoughts, my list of what I think are the things going on. At the heart of Iran is their Shia theology. I know that some of the speakers focused on that more than others, but we can't dismiss this in thinking that we are so open-minded about religious differences, because Judeo-Christian ethics and values support life, and this theology of Shia is very supportive of death and injuring people. They focus on the 12th Imam, the Mahdi, you've heard that mentioned. Their goal is to be exceptionally Sharia compliant, which is why burning and crucifying and stoning and death are acceptable, because those are Sharia compliant activities. In some of the work that I've read recently, they believe that when Jesus returns, he will accept Allah as the accurate God and bring all of Christianity along to Islam with him. So those are our views that come out of that culture and come out of the significance of their Islamic texts. So these are in no particular order, but notes that I've taken as things have gone along. We have side deals which are released to us through secretive sources. We probably don't even know if those are the only side deals. We just know that 2 of them were leaked, and they allow Iran to do their own inspections. So that's a very odd situation when we are worried about how they are handling their nuclear facilities. Some of their nuclear sites are known, some of them are above ground, most are underground, and we don't know maybe where all of them are. So there are things that will be able to continue and advance, and we may have no knowledge of them. Claire and I have been having some talks because we both attended conversations and talks with people in Israel and people here, and that there's really a goal, a global goal, to put all Shia Muslims in one region, which would be the Middle East, and then force Sunni Muslims to be in the African areas of where Islam is. Well, most of you know that most Muslims are Sunni, so that means conquering a lot of people in the Middle East, really putting the squeeze on Saudi Arabia. Tehran controls capitals in many other countries, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, and they're working very hard to be the controlling country in that entire area. So what will Sunni Islam be in the Middle East? What will it look like once this deal is signed? Many of you might know this, but there are a couple of Iranian women's groups in America who are working on women's issues in Iran for Iranian women. If you go on their websites, you look at these women, they're so beautiful, the way they look, the way they're dressed, and their counterparts, the way they live in Iran, it's heartbreaking. So for those of you who are on the women's issues, that's something to really look at. One of the most recent things I took a look at is that they've now figured out that Iran has funded over 100 different terrorist groups worldwide. Like, I wouldn't be able to memorize all of those. You know, when you had to learn the state capitals, you didn't have to learn 100, you only had to learn half of that. Okay, many say that how people will treat others will really have to do with how they treat their own people. What are the human rights in Iran that would lead us to believe that they would have logical and acceptable human rights outside of their country. Well, they have the worst human rights record in the world, so we can't be too excited there. There are many books on the topics. One of them that interested me a lot was produced by foundations, I'm blanking on it, FDD, Foundations for Defense of Democracies, a book about the Pastoran, which are the people who make up the IRGC. This may be surprising to you, but in our country, the military does not own the economy. In Iran, the IRGC owns all parts of Iranian economy. So these people are not at all interested in losing their authority and their power. You know, how do our vets feel about the deal? Well, we've heard from 2 veterans groups today, and they certainly don't support it. There are other organizations, many of them, who've spoken with us today, and we realize that there isn't any reasonable organization that supports it. Many of you are maybe not familiar with why we're treating the bill the way we're treating it in Congress, and that's because Congress didn't think they would have a chance to interact on the bill at all. So the Corker bill was passed that required the president to submit the bill to the House and the Senate, and the president agreed. He signed it. That was one of his ways of being able to continue his negotiations, was to placate Congress that way. So instead of dealing with this deal as though it was a treaty, we're dealing with it in a concocted way that's going to require passage. Then it's going to, of both houses, rather than the Senate only, which is, the House doesn't look at treaties typically. Then it's going to go to the president. He will veto it if it passes both houses. And then it will have to come back for a veto override. So we're really gearing up for votes in the veto override, and you should know that when you're asked to make connections with senators and congressmen. Iran is creating the most efficient ballistic missile systems in the Middle East, and they're now buying S-300 missiles from Russia, which Russia's agreed to sell them now that this deal, quote unquote, is going to give sanctions relief. And so we are looking at a country who's trying to put nuclear warheads on ballistic missiles. They can already reach Israel, and they can already reach Europe. Those ballistic missiles are for us. So it's really unfortunate that we don't have 10 times as many people here, but hopefully once our video's up on the website, people who had other obligations will be able to review it. We put this rally together in 8 days, which was quite a miraculous thing to do. You know, you go back to what Alan West said, and you want to know, well, who is Ernest Moniz, who is the Secretary of Energy, and who is John Kerry, who is the Secretary of State? These people have not been pro-American, and they're not acting in a pro-American way. And the fact that they dragged Jacob Lew into the testimony in Congress, it was like Larry Moe and Curly. They're like sitting there telling things. They're absolutely inaccurate, and these are 3 of the most powerful people in our world. It was pretty shocking. Hamas is planning to take a visit. Abbas is planning to take a visit over to Iran. I got a J-Post text on my phone this morning. It said, Abbas can't wait to visit Sister Iran. It's going to happen really soon. I'm like, okay. Sunni Hamas has been benefiting from Shia Iran forever, but now it'll be in the open. It won't even be a secret. We talked about our 4 hostages, one of whom is gone 8 years. We don't even know the status of Levinson. The effects of reducing and releasing sanctions is going to impact every organization that talked to you here today. There will be money for terrorism to counter, either intentionally, obviously, or very secretly, every group that spoke with us today. The deal was signed in Lausanne, Switzerland. I lived there once for 4 months. I thought it was the greatest place in the world. It was so beautiful, and the artichokes were so delicious. Switzerland has announced that they're going to be one of the first to release sanctions. So now I have to rethink if I like Lausanne so much. You know, we were talking about the P5+1, that's Germany. Of course, those are the voting members in the Security Council of the UN. It was really audacity that Obama took this deal to the Security Council before it went all the way through Congress. We were in D.C. with Christians United for Israel during that time when that happened, that vote on that Monday, and that was just so upsetting and depressing that it was like in our country, in New York City, they were voting against us in our country. Mikhail talked about the Stuxnet virus. You know, between America and smart Western countries in Israel, we could probably slowly move Iran out of being a really ripe and ready nuclear country, but we're certainly not going in that direction. Former president was Ahmadinejad. He was terrible, and Rouhani is now the current president, and everybody in the West said, oh, he's so much more moderate. He's going to be such a better president. Well, Rouhani was one of the people who was actively responsible for the bombing of the Jewish organizations and the Jewish people in Buenos Aires. So Rouhani has blood on his hands, and he has specifically Jewish blood on his hands. You should study the Revolutionary Guard in Iran, the IRGC. As I mentioned, they own a very large part of the economy in Iran. We're in appeasement. It's like Nazi Germany. The parallels are striking and they're frightening. Benjamin Netanyahu was very, very clear to us when he spoke in Congress, and President Obama has not been clear to us one time. So we really, really need to keep this fight moving. We want vote no, and we want override vote no. We have a lot of work. We need to really focus on our Democrat elected officials. Where I live, it's pretty difficult. It's Marcia Fudge and Senator Brown. But on the 26th, there's going to be a town hall with Marcia Fudge, so it's possible that there could be some movement. If those of you have time and you can look up that information, it would be great if you could attend.